All right, welcome everyone. I think we'll get started. We're a couple minutes past and we've only got 30 minutes for what is a conversation that could last much longer than that, obviously. So my name's Moran. I'm with a company called Lumen. We're a very large scale network and data center provider around the world, and we've got some great guests here. I will let them introduce themselves with their first response, since none of them are people that I've known intimately to me. But I wanted to kind of start off with maybe just some thoughts on what I've heard over a little while here. And I guess, you know, being an American, I'm sort of legally obligated to say that bigger is better, right? But it seems like the hyperscale 300 megawatt McData center with fries and a Coke is not necessarily the only model that's going to fit in this part of the world. And so I'm curious about what's happening across the industry, if everything from the hyperscale facility, the efficiencies you get there, all the way down to the much smaller facilities and the challenges with maybe even edge computing. And so I wanted to kick off with a question around kind of sustainability by design. You guys were talking earlier about if you come in late in the process, it's kind of too late, right? That this has to be a question that's asked at the very beginning and has to be part of the dialogue from the very beginning. And Colin, maybe we'll start with you. You're involved obviously in the construction phase, and we're just talking about how you have to get involved even before the construction phase and the design phase. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what is sustainability by design from a constructor's point of view, and what do you need from your value chain to make that happen?
Yeah, thanks. Well, as we were chatting, it's all about early engagement and design development, and general contractors don't often get the opportunity to come in early to participate as part of an integrated development team, if you like. And it's a concept that is really starting to grow now and become, I guess, more common theme in the life sciences and pharma industry, because it's all about getting product to market as quick as possible with the right contractor as well to build a project efficiently and safely. So what it means for us as John Paul Construction is it's bringing your supply chain partners into the process early. It's about chasing target, chasing cost. But with the clients sitting side by side as well, and again looking at the life cycle of the project as well. Earlier on, I guess we were listening to some CEOs from the colo space, and it's about working with them to identify the shell and core that many of them are identifying here in Amsterdam at the moment now, and so reducing the demolition space, figuring out how to bring in the correct supply chain partners as well to minimize energy loss as well. I think it was the CEO from Global Switch was talking about changing the culture of their business, and we all want to be part of the culture change as well. And so collaboration, early engagement, knowledge share is important. And, as general contractors, I guess we're trying to protect our space, and our relationships. But, the more knowledge shared in the industry between design partners with the GCs, I guess the more efficient we can operate in terms of, delivering projects on time, on schedule, safely, which is very important. And taking maybe the construction phase to a different element, turning construction projects now into assemblies, so we're looking at, prefab modularization off-site, of course, which again reduces the number of people on site and maintains a very positive safety culture as well, but allows, the different elements manage the schedule and the milestone targets a lot better. I'm hogging the floor here, am I?
No, it's okay, and you're actually right. Early engagement is important, because if also the electrical part is considered in the beginning, we can give definitely the good tips how to do in construction, how to optimize. Maybe some of the stuff don't have to be all inside the building, can be outside, and so on, so on. So being early engagement and doing things more repeated or modular way definitely will help to be on sustainable. One point also is clear that it cannot be only one thing that we look. It has to be the whole value chain or the whole culture as it goes. So yeah, we can talk about efficiency in a certain switchgear or breaker, but we need to look the bigger picture as such. So, and early engagement definitely would help there.
Yeah, I quite agree. Mark Bulmer from Piping Systems. It's nice to see people, I just wanted to say, as a first step, rather than looking into a screen for 2 years. Wonderful to be at a face-to-face show. We have seen many changes the last 5 years. We've been, let's say, deeply into data centers about 15 years now. We are a background as also a Swiss company like ABB. We specialize in developing, let's say, system solutions for individual applications in industrial markets. So we're related to yourselves, Intel, for instance, ultra pure water, and these kind of high-end biotechnology, high-end applications we've developed over the years. The last years, what we've seen from the data center market has been a real push towards prefabrication. We would have not thought 5 years ago that piping system, which is usually delivered as loose parts, bundled around in boxes, and then get on with it on site, and there's your machine room, there are your condensers, connect them together, guys. Now with the technology, 3D CAD systems commonly in use, BIM absolutely common in use now with data center development, design. It's so much easier now to create spools, to create prefabricated modules, even for piping systems, that allow also the quality of workmanship on site to improve. And this has also a lot of sustainable benefits. Less workmanship on site, quality, simplicity on site. These are also benefits in terms of sustainability one shouldn't forget. Yeah? And also the other major difference we've seen in the last 12 months, I would say, actually, is that we've never been asked before from actual end operators and consultants representing operators for real data to carbon embedded values to our product. Yeah? They really ask us, okay, guys, do you have a cradle to grave analysis or an LCA, life cycle assessment of your particular product in use compared to another product, so you can really see the difference, a benchmark, not just numbers out of the sky, but a real benchmark, and then also real embedded carbon values. That was something before, I think it was in a checklist that was there with the consultants, and they sort of put a cross on it, and you put your ISO 14001 certificate in there, but now they actually ask for real data. I'm talking now about hyperscalers, large colos, the real, I would say more the higher end, larger companies are asking for that data now.
Yeah.
Real difference.
Absolutely, and I think, we've seen the same thing, right? And I think when I'm talking to folks in the U.S. who are part of our parent company, sometimes when you bring up sustainability, they're like, oh, that's a European issue, right? They're much greener over there. But in reality, the people who are making a lot of these, asking a lot of these questions are not, eco-green driven companies. They're finance people, they're lawyers. It's about risk, and it's about all these other issues. And I think, we talked a little bit about kind of that measurement, right? The people are becoming much more mature in the way they can understand risk and measure risk and quantify these kind of things that we're talking about. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit maybe about what you're seeing in that sense. Are there specific metrics? Are there specific things that are coming up beyond just the energy issue, right, which is the obvious one, around the design, the life cycle, the full life cycle of a facility? Can you build an ROI model around comparing existing construction and refitting it to brand new construction? And are those the kind of questions you're being asked? I'm curious, maybe Mark will come back this way with this one.
Yeah, definitely. That definitely the absolute question. Those are the questions being asked. We are asked, okay, in terms of the raw material, what's it embedded carbon in there? How much energy, basically the calculation of how much energy is required to produce the raw material, then into the product, and then into operation, and then into recycling, and then obviously disposal of some manner or another. And this has to be then evaluated in terms of the traditional alternative. So you can't just give the numbers up there and say, okay, my numbers are 1,000 CO2 equivalent carbon kilograms. They have to say, okay, the equivalent material would be using the same analysis, using open source data, then we have to supply the same data. Yeah? We call this a life cycle assessment of the application, the product in a certain application, and also with environmental product declarations that are then based on that information. And this has to be then also done through a third party, is what we have to do as a company. This has to be then provided to a third party engineering office and then supplied then to the consultants representing the end user. And it has actually all to do with from cradle to grave, really at the end of the day. Also, at the end of the day, the classic in Holland, the circular economy, basically that's what it's all about. Yeah? And if it's not there in terms of reusability, what we usually say is that you cannot use in terms of engineering a product when you downgrade the engineering capability of a product, the raw material. So then we say, okay, in terms of plastics, there is recycling opportunities. We have a certain problem with the word plastic because the word plastic obviously has certain iterations towards single-use plastics and not being environmentally friendly. One has to admit this is absolutely, completely true. So we have to then also do in terms of lifespan, show lifespan, availability, etc., these sort of things. But these are concrete questions being asked now,
Yeah, there are more and more analyses or customer asking how much CO2 is produced for the breaker, for example. So we need to provide all that information for the system and for the products. But it's not only that, it's also for the service. If we have a 4-hour service level agreement that we need to be on the site 4 hours, do you go there, which car you are using? So it's not only the indirect that is counted. It's coming more and more also the other areas, and also how efficient you are in your processes. So definitely Europe is driving this one, but not only Europe. Just a good example is Singapore. They are small country, limited resources, and they really drive the sustainability as well. They don't have so much land and so on. So it's not only the Europe. Definitely, I would say, not always the US as well, except the big hyperscalers, but it is coming everywhere. So, and we get those questions almost daily. It's not yet always there, the methodologies how to calculate that, but it's growing and developing very fast. And if we're talking here in 2-year time, definitely it has developed much further.
Colin, you want to touch on that one?
Yeah, I'll touch on it. I suppose as a general contractor, right, we're normally asked, how quick can you deliver it, and it's too expensive, right? Yeah. So, but I think this morning with CBRE's presentation, that there's a massive, obviously, growth spurt in space, and especially locally as well, and across Europe. And it's about, we're focusing on where the supply chain is coming from, getting our partnerships, aligned very quickly, so to cut down on obviously travel and emissions, right? But also human capital as well, and developing human capital. The projects are getting delivered a lot quicker. The schedules are tighter. Budgets are pretty much defined before you even enter. So you're sitting in terms of development, but the culture of the company, and it was spoken about by Global Switch again. We're about culture as well, and it's having a construction business that's sustainable with respect to people as well, right? So hiring apprentices, getting graduates, out of the universities that are going to add value and bring new concepts, new thoughts to a project management team as well. That's all about sustainability as well. Human capital. And especially as we grow into Europe, it's we're not looking at exporting, say, an Irish brand into Europe. We're about getting it set up and having it self-sustainable as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you can look out over this room, right, and all of us, and say, this is the silver tsunami, right, of all the people who are going to be gone in 10 years. And what's going to happen to our industry when all these people who are coming into the industry, this isn't the sexiest job that they could find. It's not the best paying. Maybe if we're not the most sustainable companies, then we've got a real problem, right?
We're just keeping the seat warm for a few years. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit to kind of that, how a lot of companies will talk about sustainability, but then the finance people get involved, and you're making trade-offs, and you're making tough decisions. To your point, some have already been made before you got there, right? And so how are you guys trying to influence your customers and the larger community through collaboration? Some of these issues are definitely pre-competitive. We need to collaborate on them rather than see them as competitive. But I'm curious what your role in that design construction phase is in terms of influencing how these companies are actually operating, how they're going to look at the life cycle of this data center from a financial perspective, and can you influence their operational models, the ways they're doing other things as part of your engagement, or are you still kind of being, kept in your own little area?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at technologies that are coming, new ones are more sustainable, and for example, bringing the new technology. I mean, the best example is non-SF6 switchgear. Bringing that on the market is not really easy because it comes a little bit with a different price tag. And if you go to the price discussion of, as you said, price is already agreed in the beginning, it is really hard to convince the customer that, yes, please go to the sustainable way rather than some other way. We do try to help customers with the calculations. Definitely, we try to help there. The challenging thing is how the projects are also purchased, because it's chopped into the silos. There is definitely really rationale behind, but many of the cases, for example, service is not part of the purchase category, and then many of the benefits comes out in the service. So It's really hard also to convince, unless you get to the end customer and say, hey, look, the full value chain, and it makes sense by end of the day, then it's a little easier. But if it's only in the different silos, it doesn't really help to convince. It doesn't matter how good the equipment or how beautiful solutions you have.
Yeah. Sometimes just the time horizon, right? A lot of the finances, you know, if you look at it over 20 years, you get a different number than if you look at it over the 2 years of construction. Yeah. Right.
On the conceptual design side, I mean, coming from the power consumption to the mechanical side, on the cooling side, I was about to say we call it a real trend, but actually it's been around for about 15 years, liquid cooling. I mean, it's been around as long as most of us have been in data centers. However, there has been a huge push the last couple of years. There is a lot going on in that respect. In terms of the conceptual design there as such, I don't think we're influencing them too much. A lot of the end users, the large hyperscalers, are working autonomously and developing their own systems, whether they're big enough to be able to do this. They have the power to be able to do it. And then also, but we can help also in terms of the vendor side or the plant engineering side in terms of making those systems as reliable and secure as possible. Obviously, when it comes to liquid cooling, you're entering the water into the white space. This creates a certain nervousness within everyone, of course. And here it's also highly important that we focus upon security and reliability of components, and also adaptability to a complete system design, a tried and tested design, so that we don't have to all just rely on individual components, buying individual people, but a tried and tested system design. So although it's a huge trend at the moment, I would say it's escalating an awful lot. I mean, due to the rack density increase the last few years and the digital transformation that we're going through, a lot to be done, I think, still in terms of making these systems as reliable, secure as possible to win confidence in the operators that it can really work properly.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that gets to maybe the S and the G part of the ESG equation a little bit more, right? Our role within a community or within civil society maybe more broadly. And, you know, are we collaborating enough with the regulators and the other organizations that could design residual heat, that could do some of these other things? And what is that, how is our industry going to drive that kind of collaboration? Obviously, the governments like to regulate, but not necessarily to collaborate. We need a seat at the table. So how are your companies thinking about getting that seat at the table and influencing the communities that you're a part of? To your point, Colin, about culture and all these other things, you know, how much is that a part of your sustainability strategy?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? Again, it comes back. I'm going to repeat myself again, but you know, again, as a general contractor, you're getting invited. You're not getting invited in early enough, right? So you're not bringing lessons learned, you know, from previous projects to the table. But certainly, I think as the industry is continuing to grow, IPD is going to become maybe a model of choice as well. And it's where you know, as a tier one contractor, you're bringing tier one design and build partners with you that are coming with, you know, new best in practice, best in school, sustainable solutions. But you know, from a contracting point of view, you know, pre-assembly, off-site fabrication, local employment as well, which is key. That's how really we add, you know, losing less water, looking at the concrete and the composition of the materials, chasing LEED and BREEAM certification, and it's something that we have, you know, in-house and that we're measuring pretty much on a weekly basis.
So that focuses your own operational excellence, really, is kind of what it sounds like. That if you're doing that right, then your contribution is in that, and bringing your expertise to the table to try to drive these outcomes.
It's what's your role as a general contractor? If it's completely turnkey, that your MEP partners are all aligned as well, and it's about improving efficiency, and that the efficiency factors are all aligned with the schedule, right, and the construction methodology for the specific project, be it greenfield, use of steel, recycling of the steel, or is it going to be, a shell that's going to be refit, and your customer is reprioritizing, their role in the society, in the culture, in the community, and again, we heard it today with Interaction or Global Switch again, having collaboration with the community as well, and municipalities on site. There's no reason why the contractor doesn't, adopt the same role in the project, so to keep the line pretty much, parallel, so to speak, with the whole project culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from ABB side, I would say that there are kind of three angles that we look into. First of all is, of course, that we operate our own all the operations, production, product development, everything in the most sustainable way. So we support the data center customer and the whole industry, that we try to use as less as possible. The other thing is that we also develop and put quite a lot of effort on the new products which are more sustainable. We need to also keep in mind that 5 years ago, the data center usually was just a consumer of energy. Today and tomorrow, they are coming prosumers, and they are working off-grid. So there are much more network elements that are used in the whole construction and electrical systems, just to name medium voltage UPS, for example. And that really helps also sustainable way to run the data center and participate on the grid functions as well. And third is also that the service portfolio that we have worked out is you don't always need to change the switchgear. You can change the breaker if it just upgrade IT racks, as it was said today. Some of the data centers are 20 plus years old. So you don't need to throw all the electrical stuff away. They are still good enough. You just retest and change the breaker, for example, or relays, and you are ready to go again 10 plus years. So sure. I think these are the way that we try to influence as well. It doesn't really, again, work all the time if you don't talk about with end customers, but I think the world is moving in that direction, that everybody starts to think that way. Then you don't always need a new stuff to use it. So I think it's on the right direction.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, basically, the cultural aspects are absolutely highly important, I think, within each supplier, each company within the supplier chain. The question is, like I said, was it coming from the politicians being driven, or do we just rely on the goodwill of the investors, the operators, that eventually they'll get around to developing and having sustainable? It doesn't work. We've seen the last 20 years that you've got to be some momentum behind it. There's got to be a motivation behind it. I think that's what's changed the last 2 years with the advent of the green funds, the ability to gain money on the stock exchange cheaper by being able to prove that it's going into a sustainable green environment. This helps an awful lot, and that is why companies such as ourselves also now, if you look at their company reports, the first few pages now are all to do with sustainability, because they're all trying to angle for this cheaper money, and to also it makes a good image, and this image now is connected also to money at the end of the day. That aspect with regard for the politicians, but in terms of the supply chain, every company, I think ourselves as well, we demand from our suppliers that they also have the same sustainable footprint as ourselves, that they take it seriously in all their processes, that there's always an evaluation if I'm changing, even if in R&D, that there's always an evaluation step there. What am I doing here to my carbon footprint? And if everyone in the supply chain does that, then there will be a dribble down effect from the top to the bottom, that eventually everyone will be taking sustainability seriously. But at the end of the day, there does have to be some kind of motivation. But at the end of the day, money talks, so it does help.
Sure.
I think, again, it all starts from the end customer. If they start demanding, then suppliers have to cope with that, and the full value chain has to come with that as well. So.
Yeah, well, and maybe the end customer's investor to some extent, right? So, I mean, to wrap up, maybe I'll ask you guys, I'll put on my end customer hat, right? And everybody's got their moonshot question at the end that these guys didn't know was coming. So if I came to you and said, I am going to build the most sustainable data center that's ever been built, and I want all of your companies to be a part of that, what is the one thing or two things that you would do in your particular area of expertise that would be kind of the thing you've never had the budget or the resources or, you know, the manpower to do. If I said unlimited budget, I just want to, this is going to be the example, what would you do?
Well, on the mechanical side, I would use direct chip liquid cooling using recyclable materials. I mean, at the end of the day, and then a system that also then at the end of its lifespan would have a long lifespan, of course, longer than the traditional materials. And then at the end of that lifespan, there would then be also recyclable at the end of the day. And that would be the most, you could have then PUEs of 1.0 something, and then you can also be having recyclable materials from the complete plant. You're using water, exit water at plus 60 degrees centigrade often in liquid cooling, especially direct chip liquid cooling. That's excellent then for heat recovery. You can use it then in smaller data centers, centralized in cities, where that water, that heat recovery is simple to use. Plus 60 degrees centigrade water is absolutely brilliant for local environmental areas, residential areas, industrial areas. So then the heat recovery side becomes also actually then a given. Perfect.
Yeah. So you've solved two big problems for me. One is scale and the other is location, right? I can build it as small or as big as I want, and I can put it wherever I want. So not bad.
On top of what Mark said, then from ABB side, we can add whatever goes upstream. We can do the best-in-the-class low-voltage switchgear and the UPSs with the best losses. We can do the medium-voltage UPS to run it in an islanding mode or off-grid mode, so you will never lose the connection out of the grid. And also with the digital layer on top of it for the safety and making sure that the artificial intelligence controls the system and your system never goes down. So
the resilience.
Swiss have got it covered.
Yeah, which is important. We don't talk about resilience a lot, but when we did a material issue survey of our customers, resilience was number one before environmental, right?
That's another 30-minute session.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So, Colin, what about you? What's your unlimited budget spend?
Yeah, it's improving efficiencies, and you can only improve efficiencies really when you're brought in, back to the early engagement discussion, back to integrated team. Where you're part of a design team and you're working on the pre-construction as the materials are presented. So it's early engagement and be part of the design process, converting it on site then to pre-assembly, modularized, depending again on the type of project it is. Sure. Yeah.
But you're right. So it's the collaboration and the culture that's being used to build this
collaboration, knowledge share, integration, one team approach.
Yeah. Oh, you nailed it. Sign me up. All right. So thanks, everybody. I think we've still got maybe 1 minute, couple minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Anybody want to throw a question at these guys?
I'll throw one.
Go for it.
I guess this one will be for you, Colin. Probably more your way out. I'm not in the area of construction, so. But people call it people, planet, profit. That's where we should be looking for true sustainability, right? But I still get the feeling from everything that you all said that it's still really about profit. It's still really about the money. That seems to drive most things. So how close is the industry, particularly from the construction perspective, how close are we actually getting to considering all three elements rather than just the one?
Yeah, it's
I didn't plant it, man. It's all you. Yeah.
Sounds like a plant, doesn't it? I'm probably doing myself out of a job here if I answer that. Look, we're obviously all about being competitive and being the contractor of choice for either the hyperscalers or the colos. But the colos want value for money. Contractor's not doing it for free. Okay, contractor needs to make a profit as well. So I think it goes back to integrated approach, and chase a target schedule, chase a target price, and in the perfect world, agree your profit up front, yeah. So
if companies are not, if organisations are bidding for work, singing from the same hymn sheet, then what I mean is if all the different organisations who are submitting terms within a particular contract are not taking sustainability equally into account, then you're going to have incredible variations in how you bid for any work.
Right.
And is that a real challenge here? Is that what we have to address? Because I say we, because of course we do have to address it. That's what sustainability is all about, working together with someone. So is that the area that we really need to focus on? Is this us talking to customers and saying, you're asking me the wrong questions?
Sometimes you got to do that, right? I mean, yeah, I'll say absolutely. We will tell people that's not the right question to be asking, right? And it's if you really are concerned about sustainability, you need to change the time horizon, number one, right? You need to not be thinking short term, but long term.
Life cycle, yeah.
Yeah, and I have a little bit experience in other industries in the past in ABB, but I would say data center is one of the industries where the connection is important. So if somebody hires the contractor, they want to have a longer term relationship. So it's not really that we squeeze out and we take the next one. So it's rather, again, having a discussion and coming to agreement is much more, I would say, actual in data center than any other segment.
That's quite correct what we were saying at the beginning, that I wouldn't also, when you were implying also with regard to the economic aspects of sustainability, that a lot of companies you regard actually as sustainability as having 4 pillars of sustainability: human aspects, social aspects, economic aspects, and environmental aspects. And one shouldn't ignore the economic aspects. At the end of the day, it is, if you're developing something sustainable, but it's not economically viable and you go bankrupt as a company, the social aspect, I mean, so there is, it's not a dirty word to imply to be aware of the economic aspects with regard to environmental things. And then we can also, ourselves, when we talk about the customers, we also, that's what they are coming to us with, these questions with regard to embedded carbon, but embedded carbon in terms of a benchmark. And that's important to have these international standards in terms of the evaluation of a product's sustainability. And that's what is sometimes missing a little bit in certain aspects, I must admit, but there are ISO standards in development that allow this level playing field. So it is a problem, definitely, yeah? But these ISO standards do allow evaluation of components and also systems on a level playing field for an independent environmental officers to allow, yeah.
I think the arrival of our parting gifts is our signal to part. So,
was it efficient?
Subtle, yes. Okay, well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much. Here, I'll take the stack there. There we go. And thank you to all of you for your attention. You bet.
And also one for you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.